Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Yupari, your daily painting show. In today's episode, we're going to be painting a portrait of a boxer pit bull terrier mix. And this pit bull was actually my stepfather's dog a long time ago. The photo reference was taken, I think, even with an iPhone 5, believe it or not. So the photo reference isn't really the best one to work from, but as I said, I want to do many more pet portraits, many more animal portraits, and so I had to dig for more I had to dig for more pictures that I wanted to use, and I really liked the dramatic lighting in this picture. I remember taking this picture so many years ago, and I thought it was amazing just because of the drastic light. Um, but in any case, we're trying to create paintings and not recreate photographs. So that's all I'm going to say with the photo reference. And of course, the photo reference will stay in the top left corner for you as I develop the painting. So what we have going on here is a very simple block in. We're using just burnt umber. And again, we are working with water mixable oil paints, just like I've been using for the past couple days now. I don't know, I just like changing things up, to be honest. Some of you may or may not like this, but I just like to experiment. And we're starting off with a very simple block in. So for those of you that may be new to art or maybe new to creating paintings of people or animals, it's all the same, really. It's all about a series of shapes and putting down as much linear information as you're comfortable with. And that was pretty much all the lines I needed. So now what we're going to be using is mass. So at the top portion of the palette, you have a light value, then you have a middle value, a dark value, and then a really dark value as we move on down. So the lighter values I'm going to make a little bit warmer. I think that just tends to be my style now, to make things warmer. But in any case, using the titanium white and a little bit of ivory black, I'm also going to have a little bit of a gray scale to move back and forth. And I'm not using any medium whatsoever other than water. Again, I'm using water mixable oil paints. And if you're curious as to exactly what materials I'm using, you can feel free to go ahead and scroll down to the description box down below, and I'll have all of that information typed up for you. So the lighter region of the color value web that I refer to it as is just yellow ochre, titanium white, maybe some cadmium yellow. Then it's burnt sienna, most likely, and then more burnt sienna to titanium white, and then burnt umber, and then the alizarin crimson, as you're seeing me mix up on the bottom there. And that's pretty much it. As long as you can maintain the values in relations, as long as you can relate the values, you don't have to have this color value web that I have on the palette. But already I'm going for those darker values, those darker accents. Now, much in the contrary to how I usually work, I'm actually just going right in for these large color masses. And I'm going to be working in a wet on wet approach. So again, I'm going to be editing these videos to be roughly about 30 minutes each day. I'm trying to present you with as many different painting subjects as possible. Now, I know I've been doing a lot of portrait paintings, and that's what my channel's been mainly about, but I've had so many requests for pet portraits and for other types of paintings that I couldn't say no. And plus, I enjoy this kind of work. I really do enjoy painting pet portraits. Yesterday's video was Pepper, my bearded dragon, and then so in any case, let's get back to the color mixtures. So it's a little bit of the cadmium yellow medium right there. So what I'm doing is I'm using a wet on wet approach, meaning I'm going to be layering wet oil paint on top of wet oil paint. But the trick is with these water mixables, with these water mixables, I am actually using a little more water in the first initial layer. So this clip is probably going to be about, I don't know, 12 minutes long. until I cover all of the masses. And I'm trying to observe each area in terms of a simplistic shape. Just a simple basic shape will do, and I'll be able to build into these shapes later. So the idea is, I've noticed with these paints in particular that I'm using, the more water that I use, the more it will start to kind of stick onto the canvas. And the canvas I'm working on is not that special. It's just a regular, your regular everyday 11 by 14 inch cotton canvas panel. It has been pre-toned with acrylic, white acrylic gesso. And yeah, it sticks pretty nicely when you use a tiny bit more water. But you need to get used to how much water to paint to put in. It's a little more tricky, I think, with water mixable than traditional oil paints. Though with traditional oil paints, I tend to work in the reverse. I use thicker paint and little to no medium for the first layer. As I go, I add more and more medium, but that's traditional oils. So for a water mixable, again, you really want to get used to how much medium you medium, how much water you put into the mix. And I found that I really don't have a need for a medium. Now with traditional oil paints, I usually use Neo McGill or Liquid or something like that just to increase the fluidity of the paint. But I found that with the water mixables, just throwing in more paint and then modulating how much water is in there works pretty well and much better than I initially gave the water mixables credit for. So for the top portion of the of our model's head, we have basically that simple combination of the yellow ochre, the cadmium yellow medium, the titanium white. So again, if you're curious as to what materials I'm using, again, all of that's going to be typed up in the description box down below for you. And so here what I'm doing is I'm pushing the contrast. So I have a variety of different brushes, and I like to keep lighter brushes, middle tone brushes, and darker brushes. So this just happens to be my darker brush, and it's going to be the one that I use to fill in all of the large spaces in this painting. So the darker darks, I'm going to be pushing the color. Okay, so I'm going to be making it much more chromatic than the photo reference. I'm not really relying on the photo reference for color at all. I'm just using the photo reference for the shape of the dog's head, the texture of the dog's fur, and all of that. And we'll see how we get into painting the illusion of fur later on. But the idea is not to get too much detail. The idea is to put just enough so that it reads at a distance. And since this is being recorded in voiceover style, I will give some momentary pauses just so I don't fill the entire video with talk. Now you can already tell that I'm pushing the color quite a bit. So I'm pushing the kind of cooler tones. So using a little bit of ultramarine blue and ivory black with the titanium white in the lighter region of the palette. And then pushing kind of a more purplish color and the darker tones. And then in the background, pretty much just using ultramarine blue and ivory black. Now I'm going to use the background color to draw with. So like I said in the beginning, I really didn't need to have every single outline filled in, every single outline there, because that's just not my style these days. I like to come back in and carve the outside shape with the background. See how we're getting a much more specific shape now? And I find this to be a really a really freeing way to work, a very liberating way to work, where you're just cutting right into the paint. And it already has a very expressive look to it, even though it still hasn't even, we haven't even reached the 10-minute mark yet. And I just want to throw in a little more chroma into the background, so that's why you saw me put in a little bit more of the alizarin crimson. So with these water mixables, using a lot of paint to maybe a tiny bit of water will give me a really nice consistency. And again, the reason that I'm working on white, as I mentioned in the past few days, the reason that I'm working on white with these water mixables is that these colors, I feel like they don't have as much strength, in my opinion, as traditional oil paints. I don't know. I haven't really put them into a scientific test of any kind, but I just feel like the chroma isn't as strong in these water mixables. That's not necessarily a bad thing though, because that's why I'm working on the white, just to kind of help to push the chroma through so that you can kind of see a little bit of the white underneath, thus raising the key of the overall value scheme. And I'm going to let the background be very bold and expressive, just kind of crisscrossing brushstrokes. Though later on I will kind of even it out. But I'll leave some of the areas to be kind of, more expressive, where you can see more of the brushstrokes. And kind of towards the top left corner, I'm making it a little more blue. So there's a little more ultramarine blue in that mixture. And you're really seeing the ease of use that I have now with the water mixables. If you recall the video a couple of days ago, the first one that I did with the water mixables in a long time, I really did struggle to cover that vase. I painted a vase of flowers a couple of days ago, and I really did struggle to cover that vase with these water mixables, but I think this is like the third one now that I've painted in a row with the water mixables. I'm really enjoying the consistency of paint to water ratio. And at this point in the painting, I was deciding whether or not I was going to put in some information for the dog's torso. There is quite a lot of fish eye going on in this photograph, which I was aware of at the time. And, I didn't really want to put in too much of the fish eye, meaning by fish eye, it means that it makes the dog's head look a little bit larger than life. So I was aware of that at that point. And now we're in the close-up shot. So now we're going to really be utilizing the wet on wet approach. Notice how we're able to paint wet on wet directly. Now you're really going to see, how the layering effect is achieved when the initial wash of color has a little bit more water. And again, this is only for Winsor and Newton's water mixable oil paints, because that's the one that I'm using. A lot of people really don't like that one, but I don't know. I thought that I would give it a try and try to learn how to use it. It's important not to judge something if you don't have enough experience working with it. And so what we're doing is we're applying a new layer of oil paint, water mixable oil paint, on top of an already existing one. So the first layer had a little bit more water and it started to sink in to the canvas. Now this layer, now as far as the color mixtures for the eye, it's pretty much just titanium white, a little bit of mixing white just for more texture, and cadmium yellow, and that was most likely just ultramarine blue and ivory black for the iris. So increasing the amount of paint that I use and increasing the amount of water actually helps the paint to layer. So it actually helps to create a new layer to add on to the existing one. But I find that it's kind of a two-layer thing with these water mixables. I don't know, maybe tomorrow or the next day or something, I'll try doing a third type of wet on wet layer. But the reason why I'm using smaller brushes now and really kind of going to town on the structure for the eye is because with these water mixables, they do get a little bit tacky. So that's something to consider. They get tacky a little bit faster than traditional oils. So that's why I'm really pushing to work a little bit faster and really trying to observe the as much. I'm trying to say as much as I can visually with as little as I can. And that's probably a little bit of Alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and a little bit of ivory black in those darker areas. Now I always say that maintain the values in the light and maintain the values in the dark. So everything that's in the light should never be as dark as anything in the dark. That being said, the shadow side of the dog is pretty much the darkest you can get. So it really does allow me to put as many different darker values in the light masses without having to worry too much in terms of like losing my sense of light and shadow. And the burnt sienna is actually coming into use here, especially in the side plane of the muzzle of the dog. So now we're starting to carve in a little bit more specificity. But see, that quickly we can obtain the form of the eye. It's a very, very simple and easy way to build what one would think is a detail. But, the word detail kind of just makes me cringe. I think of it more as a structure. See that one brushstroke of light? I consider that a top plane rather than a detail. And the fur, the way that we're going to approach the fur is with softer synthetic brushes and letting the direction of the brushstroke mimic the direction of the fur. But first I want to really get the sense of shadow here on the side of the dog's muzzle. So I'm going to be using a little bit more paint. So at that point, it's pretty much just ultramarine blue. Again, I really want to push the chroma. And you notice how it's just layering so nicely. A nice and wet on wet technique. And it's almost the complete opposite. You can literally see it on the paint. If you're watching this in 1080p, the HD. So if you're watching this in HD, you're really going to be able to see all of the little textures of the layering of the oil paint. It's really quite fascinating to learn a different medium. And again, it's not that far of a stretch, from traditional oil paints to water mixable oil paints. But just the fact that I've been learning this on my own in the past few days is something that I'm kind of proud about. I usually tell people one of my biggest interests in life is learning. I consider learning one of my favorite hobbies, I would say. Though I'm a person with very few hobbies. The only hobby I really have is, my interest in animals. And the direction of the brushstroke is also kind of following the direction of the form on the dog's snout. Notice how these kind of these cross hatches, or let's just say hatch marks, they're following, see that? Following diagonals as it moves up and across towards the ear, and then softening where necessary. And we're going to be pushing the coolness of that area with the titanium white and ultramarine blue. I do admit I want to get a stronger blue. I need to go to the store and look for, I don't know if they have a cerulean blue in this water mixable or not. That would be a nice color. And there we have a simple brushstroke indicating the mouth. And you can really see the boxer coming out of this. I remember this dog, my stepfather's dog, was a boxer pit bull terrier. Well, he ended up having to give away the dog, but I do remember. This was quite a very nice dog. And we're softening the edges as well. So remember, I had that gray scale on my palette, and that's why I had the gray scale, because I could easily switch between color temperatures, because there are a lot of different kind of gray, dark grayish tones on the dog. And a little bit more of a light tone. And now we're going to really get into the fur. So burnt sienna was quite useful in these brush strokes, because now that I have that layer of the light, now I'm going over it with the darker touch. But it's just fascinating to see how the paint just sticks on so easily. If you haven't tried out water mixable oil paints and you're curious about it, don't be deterred by what other people say about them, including myself. I didn't like them as that much in the beginning, and I will admit, in the past videos, I got kind of in trouble for experimenting with certain mediums, and I'm not going to do that again. So just water with these water mixables, and it's working really nicely. Now we have a dark accent for the snout. And that was most likely Alizarin crimson and ivory black. And pushing a little bit more of a bluish tone for the darker portion of the dog's nose. Just trying to get more contrast in the image. And back to that burnt sienna, we're starting to put in some more darker tones. And a little bit of the mixing white and the cadmium yellow, and we're able to put in another little soft touch of light. The burnt sienna and the cadmium yellow are actually working together really nicely in these lighter tones. And now notice how the direction of the brush strokes that we just added in these past, I don't know, this past like minute or whatever, is really starting to give the effect of the fur at a distance now. Now when you come up really close, it just looks like a bunch of scattered brush strokes, but at a distance, you really get the effect of the fur. And just a single brush stroke there for the light on the corner of the dog's ear. And this is actually one of the first subjects I remember painting in oil paint. Back when I was in high school, I really, really enjoyed painting images of dogs. So that's going to lead me to question of the day. When you first started oil painting, what was the subject that you were painting? When you first started, were you painting still lives? Were you painting dogs, people? I tell you, my first oil paint was a still life, but I did transition into a lot of portraits of dogs. That's just something that always caught my attention. So that will be question of the day. And with the burnt sienna and a little bit of the cadmium orange, we throw in a little touch of light in the corner of the ear. But I'm really enjoying the effect of these brush strokes. And we have only about, I don't know, like 6 or 5 minutes left in today's episode. And already at this point, I'm really happy with the effect of the form on the dog, with the color variations that we've been talking about, and with the textures of the paint. And this just goes to show you, you don't have to have the most expensive tools. You don't have to have the most expensive brushes. You don't have to have the most expensive paints or painting surfaces. And even my photo reference is not that great of a photo reference. But again, like I always say, every day that we can paint is a good day. Every day that we can be in the studio is a day we can have fun and learn. And I'm just kind of pushing the intensity of the light a little bit more. And that's most likely just titanium white and cadmium yellow that we used. And now what we're going to do is just try to add a little bit more finesse to these edges. That is, sharpen some edges more and soften some edges. Basically. I will notice that the snout on the dog that I painted might be a little bit longer than the snout on the photo reference, but it's okay. Remember, it's a painting, not a photograph. And you can really see that I relied on that burnt sienna very heavily, and the burnt sienna and the alizarin crimson are actually the only water mixables that I have that are not Winsor Newton brand. So again, for the full information, please check the description box of this video. But the burnt sienna and the alizarin crimson are Holbein Aqua Duo water mixables. And I will say, now that this is like the third one that I've done in a row with these paints, I will say that those are handling a little more similarly to traditional oils. So that is, my burnt sienna is not really getting as sticky as, say, my burnt umber or my cadmium red. And now at this point, I decided to throw in the dark for the dog's chest and the dog's leg, and I elongated it. So I purposefully dropped it down and made the dog's torso a little bit larger than the photo reference. Again, because the photo reference is fish eyeing the dog. So I didn't want to fish eye, though that's fine if you like to paint a fish eye effect. That's not really the effect that I was going after. But I'm going to be building the torso a little bit in the same kind of fashion as I built the face, but I will admit one thing I tend to always say: when in doubt, blur it out. I'm always going to present you with the truth. So the truth is, I didn't know how much I wanted to put in for the dog's torso. So all of these brush strokes that you're seeing me put in right now, I will eventually blur. I will blur them just so I don't see that right there. So I'm blurring it just so that it doesn't draw attention to itself. And it's just enough to suggest that it's there. I think in terms of my own aesthetic, everyone has their own aesthetic and the own look that they want to portray on their canvases. But it was just my choice to have it much more blurred and much more expressive and kind of brushy towards the dog's torso. I don't know. I kind of just don't like when everything is rendered or painted to the same degree. That is. And now we're just going to sign it with a little bit of the titanium white and a little bit of water. That being said, I really hope that today's video helps you out. And remember, in a world that can be so negative, be the spark that ignites positivity among all of us. I really do hope that you have an amazing day, and I'll be back again very soon.